Let's go.
Yeah. And we got the first October edition of the pod. Yeah. For any of you out there that wanted to know the production of these instrumentals, Tana's so lit. Beats are so good, don't you agree? You guys can check him out. He's got a YouTube channel. The best when it comes to the beats. All right, let's see. Let's do a quick little rundown of what we're going to be discussing in tonight's show. Might have some panel members. I'll be sure to get them on here as soon as they're available. If they decide to stop by, we can get them on. Should be a pretty exciting show with the topics that we got lined up. All right, so I gotta discuss this Verizon outage. So we're definitely going to do that. That's something that we always do anytime there's something big within the industry and it kind of shakes things up. You know, we do a pod. So I wasn't able to do it over the last couple of days. Things been so busy, but we'll do that today. We'll cover it for sure. And then you guys can obviously chime in on your experiences and what happened, what you saw and stuff like that. And I'll kind of take some of that in and we'll discuss that. DirecTV, Echostar, Dish, AT&T, that whole transaction. We'll talk about that a little bit today. Let's see here. Dish and Echostar and Boost Mobile as a direct-to-device solution, right? So basically satellite for smartphones. Right, so that's pretty major. Let's see, what else should we do? How about this other story here? This one's pretty good too. Mobile X. We'll take a look at their plans, what they decided to do. I'd say they put themselves in a position to be one of the best in terms of value. They put themselves in that discussion. You guys know how I feel about the value that Mint Mobile brings to the table, and Total Wireless. Really big on those offers. And now with Mobile X kind of in the fold, I want to put them in there too. If we have the time, we can also discuss the Verizon tower deal that really just created a ton of cash. And Verizon, I don't know, what do they want to do with the cash? You know, we can kind of speculate on that, I suppose. And then I think we'll kind of close things out with the T-Mobile data breach fine. We'll talk about that. Pretty heavy fine, actually. I've never seen a data breach fine that hefty. But why the hell not? You know, since they don't care to protect the data, let them get fined. Let it hurt, right? So We got a possible moose sighting, ladies and gentlemen. We'll be sure to get Moose on here to discuss the topics. He should be here shortly. Okay, solid. Let's start things off by getting up to speed with the news. And the big story from the start of the week. What a day Monday was. It started with this. It started in the morning with Verizon outage reports. And the service reports were extensive. There were hundreds of thousands of reports of, issues with the Verizon network. I seen some pretty major cities, right? Chicago, Phoenix, Denver, Indianapolis, Seattle, Minneapolis, Omaha, Cincinnati, LA, to name some of them. Those are towns with a lot of folks. Chicago's a town that has millions of people. Phoenix is a big city, Denver. These are bigger markets, So having outages in them is gonna obviously have some pretty big reach. What's really interesting and weird at the same time with respect to Verizon outage is I'm sitting in a room, because I'm a school teacher and I've got a large majority of the students have Verizon. Their parents have Verizon. And like some of the students' phones weren't working and some of them were. I looked at my phone and it was working, and I'm thinking to myself, well, what's so special about the lines that are working versus the ones that aren't? And I couldn't figure it out. Some people were on the brand new plans, some people were on legacy plans. It didn't make a difference. Some had service and some didn't. And then I thought about the devices, and I'm looking at iPhones everywhere, and some of them worked and some of them didn't. In fact, my iPhone and my Galaxy S24 were both working for Verizon. Meanwhile, around the school, I'm looking around and some iPhones were working. So I don't have an answer for you guys. And the worst thing about telcos is they never tell you what you want to know. They never tell you what you need to know. They don't admit to doing stuff, right? And they don't tell you the details. So they didn't say and give us any indication what caused the issue and what caused the outage, and then what they did to mitigate it. And the worst thing about it actually is, how do you prevent this from happening moving forward? Chances are it'll never stop. We're always going to have outages. There'll always be, networks going down for X amount of time. You like to hope to think that those outages are less numerous and you hope that they don't last too long, but they sure do seem like something that just happens. Um, I think what's worth asking is, if you're a Verizon customer, was it extensive enough to where it makes you want to change your perception on Verizon? Most folks that have Verizon chose them for a reason. They're the network guys, right? Largest network, most available network, most reliable network, self-proclaimed. JD Power and Associate surveys always seem to indicate this, that people see Verizon as in a very positive light when it comes to the network, right? And they have that pedigree and they have that reputation. So when you have the outages, does it jeopardize the reputation? And I think the answer to that is always going to be yes. If you're known for reliability and you're known for having this big, reliable network, and then it doesn't perform that way, then that target's on your back. And trust me, people got smoked for Verizon whenever the network goes down, because they say they're the best and because they say they're the most reliable. So when it isn't reliable, people are going to be shooting for them. And I think it just comes with the territory. For what it's worth, AT&T has had network outages too, and so has T-Mobile. They've had bigger ones in the past couple of years. I think back to the T-Mobile outage from a couple of years ago in the summer. That one was huge. That one was extended duration. But they've been pretty good on outages since then, right? So it's been good to see T-Mobile making gains in that respect. AT&T for a long time, for several years, has become quite the reliable network, and then this year hasn't been that good to them, right? So these outages do happen. The trouble is when they last for a very long time, right? It's one thing to have your phone not working properly when you're driving to work, your commute maybe an hour or two or something local is and short-lived. Maybe a couple tower sites are down or just some kind of issue locally. And then you're up and running by lunch or something like that, right? And because you're at work, you get on Wi-Fi, it's like whatever. But like if you go to work and your phone wasn't working, you're at work and you're on your break and it's still not working, right? So you're relying on Wi-Fi. And then you leave work and it still isn't working. So you're off the Wi-Fi, you're now on your commute and you can't connect to any network. So you're streaming your podcast, the SMT podcast, whatever, you're listening to music, you're trying to do your calls and you're catching up on all those things. You're not connected, right? So it's a tough situation. It's about making sure that if and when outages do happen for these networks, it's short-lived, it doesn't last very long, and you don't want them to be numerous, right? You don't want this to become a characteristic flaw of your network. So I think T-Mobile's done a nice job to become much more reliable, and I think AT&T is trying to overcome some of those issues from this year. And I think for the most part, Verizon's been pretty reliable. I'm trying to think of outages. They've had a couple of smaller ones, but I can't think of a major one or anything like that. So the carriers are actually doing pretty good. This definitely wasn't a good look, but it is something worth mentioning. And like I said, I don't know how many people it impacted. Down Detector said there were hundreds of thousands of reports of down networks being down. And and that's only the people that report. Some people are not so bold to report. They don't even know they can go to Down Detector. They don't know Down Detector exists. So if thousands are reporting on it, then millions are probably impacted, right? And that was one of the things that the press releases were indicating. This was a national outage. It was happening all over the place. I don't know how many lines it impacted. I don't know what it took to restore things. Typically, it's the re-onboarding process of the devices to the network that becomes troublesome. So those could be part of the issues. So maybe they had it fixed and, they had a solution, but a lot of technical issues getting phones back online onto the network could have made things more complicated to the end. So pretty big outage, pretty big reach. Definitely not a good look. Not a good look for Verizon, right? The company, the network, and all that stuff. I mean, who knows? And you guys can speak to it. If you're a Verizon customer, are you thinking about leaving over this outage, or is it just kind of a glitch in the matrix? You're kind of moving past it. They fixed it quick enough, or it didn't impact you in any major way. That's where things I think get hairy. Is like, was the outage big enough? Was it long enough to where now you're talking about switching up companies? All right. So for the Verizon customer who became very disgruntled, displeased, are you going to go to AT&T? Are you going to go to T-Mobile or possibly an MVNO of either one of those two? And I think it goes to show you, like, there's a reason to have multiple lines. I know people don't necessarily believe in that or subscribe to that school of thought. But I think at this point, even if I didn't have my YouTube channel where I have like 7 different lines of access, I still think I would have 2 different providers. I still think I would, right? I would have some combination of Verizon and then either AT&T or T-Mobile, and maybe that's how your area is too, or maybe you would go with a different combination of 2 networks. But I mean, it's pretty good to have those kind of flexible options, and there's ways to get prepaid on the low. Like, for example, if you want a good deal on the T-Mobile network, the best deal on the T-Mobile network, right? You're getting it from Mint Mobile. We have a partner link for that. It's in the description. You're not going to beat $15 a month, right? And whether that's your primary or your secondary, right? It is a legitimate competitor in value, right? And that gets you T-Mobile access. And then for Verizon, let's say you don't want to pay Verizon, you want to get something of a better deal. You can go to Visible, you can go to Total, you can go to US Mobile. There's so many ways to get access to that network for the deals, with better prices. And AT&T's got prepaid options too, Cricket and AT&T prepaid proper, right? And those types of things. And with Boost being a really good option. You get on a standalone 5G network, and then when you're not connected to that network, you're on AT&T, right? So, and backup internet's something that I think is worth considerations. Backup lines are worth considerations. I think I think it's almost necessary in how much we have to stay connected these days. You know. All right. Let's go ahead and do this next story. And I don't think I covered this yet on the channel at all. So this will be news to I think most of you. All right, let me go ahead and zoom in so you guys can see it on the screen. All right, T-Mobile agrees to pay $31.5 million to resolve FCC data breach charges. All right, as the story reads, T-Mobile has agreed to pay the $31.5 million in the aftermath of a series of data breaches and significantly overhaul its cybersecurity practices to better protect consumer data. Settling with the FCC, which was announced Monday, requires T-Mobile to spend half of the money on bolstering its cybersecurity posture and the other $15.75 million as a civil fine to the government. T-Mobile is required to add robust modern architectures, including zero trust and multi-factor authentication measures, according to the FCC. Shout out to the Bearded Dragon, who has been heavily investing time, studies, and efforts into zero trust. I think that's the only way to go. The settlement resolves charges involving multiple T-Mobile data breaches caused by allegedly poor cybersecurity practices in 2021, 22, and 23. Those incidents impacted millions of T-Mobile customers and involved various exploitations and methods of attack, according to the FCC. Breaches involved by the settlement affected current, former, and prospective T-Mobile customers, as well as MVNOs. Information leaked included customer names, addresses, dates of birth, SS numbers, driver's license numbers, as well as customer subscription information. Jessica Rosenworcel, the FCC chairwoman, said in a statement, "Today's mobile networks are top targets for cybersecurity criminals. Consumers' data is too important and much too sensitive to receive anything less than the best cybersecurity protections." All right. So check this out, guys. $80 million fine. Now a $31 million fine for T-Mobile based on cybersecurities, right? I think the discussion has to start by saying something along the lines of, these carriers don't care about protecting your data. In fact, sometimes I think they want it to be vulnerable. They have designed their systems to be heavily flawed, exploited, and, Game Boy level security. They were never really trying to protect your data. And the reason we know this is because you had multiple data breaches in consecutive years, in consecutive quarters. They weren't stopping a nosebleed. And then I look at that and I look at this amount of $31 million and how it's kind of being split up, part of it as a fine and part of it as reinvestment into cybersecurity measures. If T-Mobile's going to dump $15 million into new cybersecurity measures, my question is, what the hell have they been doing previously? Like, what assets, what money, what funding, what projects, what strategies have they deployed that were designed to prevent these hacks from happening in the first place? And the other question to this is, did the FCC ever stop and think that maybe there are certain things that the carriers should not be able to collect and hold for extended amounts of time, right? Because it gets to the point where it's like, if you know you're going to get robbed, why would you carry something on you that's valuable, right? So to give you the analogy, if you're walking down the street and you're not from a place and the place is kind of rough, why would you walk around with your life savings? Why would you walk around with valuable items in your pockets that, were not concealed or protected? You wouldn't do it, right? There's a reason why there's locks on doors, and apparently T-Mobile didn't have any locks on their doors, you know? And it maybe if it was important for T-Mobile as a business, they would have protected it better, but clearly they never cared about consumer protections. I don't think AT&T does either because they've been hacked, right? And then when I think to Verizon, I mean, they've had hacks with Visible, I think, but I'm trying to think of recent events. There hasn't been any, but I mean, could they really be that much better? I mean, you got to think there's vulnerabilities there at some point. So there's so many different facets to this. The fine, the forced reinvestment into cybersecurity. I think both of those are great, right? Fining, making it hurt, and then obviously it's not that much money for the fine. It's nothing to T-Mobile, who generates tens of billions of dollars in revenues, right? Multiple billions of dollars of free cash flow. Like, what do they care? 15 million. That's the cost of doing business. That's just a business expense, but the money that's being forced to be spent on better security, I think that's a good intention, of sorts, if you want to kind of consider it that. But man, these carriers should really do better. They must. Can't continue to have these breaches. They're not even trying. And they have so many customers and there's so much information that these bad actors can take. All right. Let's do this story. Where is that thing? All right. This one is really good. All right. Echostar sets sights on direct-to-device market. The quote here: "We have the spectrum rights and opportunity to make direct-to-device a global business." That is Echostar CEO Hamid Akavan. He's got the assets. All right. So Echostar, or the business formerly known as Dish, you guys may know them as Boost, right? Will pursue with vigor in the wake of a complex series of financial moves where they sold Dish pay TV business to DirecTV. And if everything works out and that gets approved and the deal gets finalized, it gives Echostar, Dish, Boost Mobile a new lifeline, right? So we're looking to see where the company's going to go from here. They're going to finish their 5G network build, and apparently they're looking at the D2D platform, right? So using satellites for connectivity when the terrestrial network isn't available. All right, so these moves for Echostar will be, paramount to their company's future. All right, President and CEO Hamid Akavan views direct to device as one of the greatest, if not the single greatest opportunity left in the space right now in terms of the impact on consumers and global relevance and also financial return. Okay, so a couple of things there. Number one, he's saying this is a huge frontier. He's calling it the last of the great opportunities in the space. So that's the first thing. The second thing, he mentions global relevance and financial return. So for scale, he's not just talking about in the United States, he's talking about global. So that could mean international accessibility. And the last piece to this, he speaks to the financial return that has to do with monetization. Now, don't get me wrong. What he's saying is correct. And what I think he's trying to make a statement about is the fact that he's saying it is a profitable business, potentially. What I would question is, and what this guy isn't addressing, Dish, Boost Mobile, Echostar, whatever the name is, they have never made money. They have never, in the multiple years that they've been running Boost Mobile, been able to show improvements in margins and grow the consumer base. They have improved margins, but it has not made itself obvious to an investor or to any financial institution. I need to start investing my resources into this company because they are so good at what they do. This company has been a train wreck. They have lost customers quarter after quarter after quarter. So in order for me to believe you, Mr. CEO, Mr. Hamid Akavan, I would have to see this parlay into something that shows up on your balance sheet and shows up on your 10K. I need to see profits, I need to see revenues, and I need to see that actually manifest itself. When would we be seeing direct to device? I have no idea. Let's see. Let's read on. EchoStar is, quote, very focused, Akavan said. We have the spectrum rights and opportunity to make direct to device a global business. Okay, so I'm not going to argue that. I think he's correct to say the statement in that fashion. He mentioned spectrum rights. It's true. There is a lot of bandwidth that is currently being utilized for satellite and satellite TV that if it was to make its way over to cellular terrestrial operations or direct to device through satellite for smartphones, yeah, it would be pretty amazing. And it's a lot of bandwidth, right? Which means with a lot of bandwidth that can create a lot of capacity, right? So something to consider. He acknowledged that the D2D represents an expensive endeavor, noting that EchoStar will likely explore partnerships to build up a strategy. So here's another talking point. He's basically saying they don't have the funding to do this themselves. They're going to need investors. They're going to need partners. He did not mention who they would be working with, but if you look at the way that Verizon and AT&T have done it with AST, and you look at the way that T-Mobile has done it with SpaceX, right? And we've seen Skylo with Android, and we've seen Global Star with Apple. It does seem to me like partnerships are kind of a necessary thing. All right, goes on to say, we do believe it's better for us to work with partners, not necessarily because of the capital availability, which is very important, but also from a perspective that it's a global offering and you'd like to have more participants in there in order to advance its chance of success and deployment. I think there's some truth to that. You want to have global partnerships since you want to and you aspire to make it international service. You probably want to have international partnerships. So the foundation of what Dish wants to do in EchoStar, what they want to do with this direct to device, it sounds really good. The plan seems really good. I think their understanding of the situation is very strong. This is going to come down to execution. It is not easy to do direct to device. If it was easy, well, then why the hell can't SpaceX do it? Why are they having such a hard time being able to accomplish it without trying to violate rules? It's definitely not easy. And that's why I think the partnership piece is so important. I think pooling together assets, I think establishing those partnerships for the sake of the business execution gives financial flexibility, capital allocations being split up and kind of partitioned. It makes it for a much more digestible situation that can be handled by multiple parties. It's just not easy to do. And the other piece to this, he's convinced it's profitable. Well, what proof exists when nobody right now is charging for satellite to device? Apple has it included in their services. Android's probably going to include it in theirs with Skylo. Verizon has already said, Sampath, the consumer CEO, told me, via Twitter on the platform, he said, we're not charging for it right now. So, and a couple of things could be happening there. It could be that they want to just introduce the service and get people using it, or they need beta information and data. Or I think it just isn't good enough, so they know they can't charge for it yet. So while they work through those details, they can kind of figure out how to make it better, more effective, and then they feel they could charge for it, right? But I don't know, man. I don't know. I know Dish has moved away from satellite TV now, and I know they're all in on their 5G network. And direct to device would be pretty huge for them. And it doesn't look like they can or will do it alone. They're going to do it with partners. And I think that's something that I would probably advise them to do. If I was an advisor for Dish, I would tell them, don't try to do this alone. It is a heavy burden to try to create a satellite connection that's going to be making usable network access when you don't have your cellular terrestrial network available. And, does this ever become a situation where, EchoStar's direct to satellite connection, the satellite to the cell phone will be the primary connection and they won't go on the AT&T network or the T-Mobile network, their partner networks? I think that remains to be seen. I mean, it couldn't be that fast of a connection Could it really do a 4K video stream? I don't know. Um, B, I'm not sure when you came in, but I was talking about this, Echostar direct to device. If you've kind of been in on some of the conversation here, my monologue, what's kind of your take on it?
I don't have a whole lot of information on this thing. Good evening, person. I'm sorry. I don't have a whole lot of information on it, to be honest with you, man. I don't know a whole lot. I know that it's been, of course, obviously sold and everything like that. I know what they're trying to do, but I don't have yet enough information to be able to comment too much on what it is that you said, other than to kind of echo some of the sentiments that you just said about the technological um, challenges. Um, Surrounding trying to make this work, and then also some of the financial incentives to that. I'm not exactly sure what the return on investment is going to be for all of that work. I know I've talked to you about that before. I've kind of given my advice and given some of my insight on it. I'm still waiting to figure out how the industry is going to monetize this new offering. What's the return on investment? I mean, I know you're going to have to continue to try to find ways to be innovative as an industry. That's what it seems like everyone's trying to do. But for what it is that you have to put in for this, to get it off the ground and to get it to work, I really don't know what the return is going to be. How much revenue you're going to be able to generate from this offering? Is this something that the consumer base has been asking for? Is this something that's going to work better than a terrestrial network investment would? In my opinion, the answer to those questions is no and no and no. So, we'll see what happens. I mean, this is not something that is going to stop. All of the companies have made varying levels of investment in the sort of having some sort of satellite, offering for their customer base. But what's the return on investment on investment going to be? We'll see. We'll find out.
I'm trying to figure out if the question is about returns and margins and profits and revenue stream, they're clearly sprinting to get this service up and running. I don't know if I could really speak to EchoStar directly. I don't know any of the internal developments or the projects that they're doing, but I'm watching AST and T-Mobile and Verizon. I'm watching AST sprint to get this thing going. I'm watching SpaceX and Starlink with the T-Mobile service. I'm watching them sprint to be the first. Right? They're running as fast as they can, as hard as they can to launch these services, and they all keep saying the same thing. We're going to monetize this. This is going to be profitable. And when you allocate $1 billion into a project, you obviously want a return. So I think your concerns are valid. The points you bring up are fine. I don't have any problem with them. But when they tell us that this is going to be profitable and they're sprinting to get this out to market, don't we kind of have to believe them in that respect? Why would you sprint to lose money? You know what I mean? Like, why would you be in a hurry to dump money into something that isn't glaringly obvious that you are going to make money on it in terms of a return?
Um, because the next competitor is doing it. That's why. It's kind of everybody chasing each other. Monkey see, monkey do. This one here has got the offering, so I need to have it too. That's where it seems like the industry is right now. But if it was a competitive, you know, value proposition and it was something that could be monetized, why has it been given away? I understand, you want to try to get people using it and all that kind of thing, but the vast majority of the country already has significantly sufficient network access, at least from a coverage standpoint. We know that there are some areas of the country that still have areas of responsibility and still have areas of opportunity, excuse me, to be able to improve coverage and whatnot. But the places where the people in the country live, the coverage is pretty sufficient. So you're talking about this pretty much being one of those niche service offerings. And to me, there's a lot of investment going into this for it to be a niche offering. This doesn't seem to be something that's going to be, one of those real revenue drivers. I don't see it, Steve. I don't see it personally. for what these carriers are having to invest, the spectrum that they're having to take off of their terrestrial networks in order to make it work. I don't see the return. That's just me personally. I'm open to continue dialogue, and I'm open to having new information get presented to us. Maybe I'm wrong. I hope I am. That'd be great. But right now, I don't see it. I just don't see it.
A lot of people are going to point to Hurricane Helene and say, "Damn, I wish we had it." There's a lot being made of the extreme weather events that continue to intensify in magnitude, right? And the thing that happens with these network outages due to things like hurricanes is the first thing that happens are power outages, right? And then you also get the complications of like radio gear, becoming compromised, damaged, flying off the tower sites bending, falling down, like gear completely compromised. So you've got segments of networks that are completely out, whether it's because of a lack of power or it's because of actual damaged gear. The application in this case seems to make sense, right? Having a cellular terrestrial network that may have issues within certain segments due to those circumstances then gets this supplemental direct to device access, through satellite really seems to make a lot of sense. And there have been people who have taken the opportunity to clamor and promote the potential solutions that companies like AST and SpaceX, Skylo and these others, like that's the use case, right? Emergencies, even in and of themselves, deserve a solution. And I tend to agree. I think that the primary use case for a satellite network would be emergency notifications, text messaging, and calling. I think that's the ideal use case. And then I guess if the constellation is dense enough and the technologies are good enough and the bandwidth is good enough, then we could start talking about, you know, uh, some data usage, right? And look, I don't know, which company is going to do which better and how they're going to execute it. I don't really pander to brands, right? I don't want to. I mean, we know about the problems with SpaceX and 1900 megahertz and all that. I get it, and I'm hoping that things work out so they can actually utilize it and people can connect to it. But damn, like if you could watch all that has played out in the last week with that extreme weather, you could see where this type of service comes in. And like Ricky's saying, it's a non-terrestrial network. So when terrestrial networks fail, you have a non-terrestrial backup that's going to connect some really important people to save some people's lives.
Yeah, and that's great. And I certainly acknowledge that, and I agree with you, and I align with what you're saying. But what does the carrier get out of it? Is the customer willing to pay more for that? Um, I don't know. We'll find out real soon. Because I don't think it'll be given away free forever. But I don't know. Is the customer going to be willing to pay for that? Um,
Well, is the company like that's building the network willing to charge for it?
well,
Usually when they're willing to charge for stuff, customers are willing to buy stuff.
well, sometimes yes, and sometimes no. But I agree. I think the fact that it's being given away free, is kind of the carriers dipping their toe in order to try to see if there's even going to be a market for it. And I think if it's free, then of course there'll be a market for it. And a piece of chicken that tastes horrible, if it's free, somebody's going to go and get that piece of chicken. So you like I did that, right? So more chicken. But
Yeah, more chicken.
it is what it is there. But I will say, the carriers are going to have to get something out of this because you're weakening the terrestrial network in order to make this work. And the terrestrial network, in my opinion, the last thing it needs is to be weakened. If anything, it needs to be strengthened. And for this to work, there are not enough natural disasters happening in this country to substantiate any sort of lessening of the performance of the terrestrial network. We don't get enough tornadoes. We don't get enough hurricanes. We don't get enough hail. None of that. It doesn't happen enough to substantiate that level of investment, especially if it's being given away for free. I don't think that it's there. The business case isn't there. So I could see why. I could see how consumers and law enforcement, everybody benefits except the carriers. And that's kind of been the common theme for at least a decade or so now. Nobody in the industry outside of T-Mobile, because they were allowed to pretty much make history and break precedents as far as buying another company and whatnot. One of the big four buying one of the others. I don't think that's going to happen again for the foreseeable future. But it's from an organic growth standpoint, financially, nobody's really in the industry been able to figure out how to grow organically from a financial standpoint enough to be able to appease investors and all of the different stakeholders for these different areas of telcos. It just hasn't happened yet. So I mean, we'll see what happens. I don't know, Sneed, but I'm not gonna lie to you. I'm not very optimistic that people are going to be willing to pay extra money every month, for example, for a service that they may use once, maybe twice a year. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it just depends. I think it depends on how they integrate it into plans. I think that's really the answer. If you want to scale it on a scaled basis, it's going to be like we're going to put this as an included feature on a premium plan, right? So that allows it to be indirectly monetized. I think the other option is to also feature it as an add-on in the same format that they have with, say for example, like Verizon with My Plan or AT&T how they have a turbo add-on, like structure it in that way. I think T-Mobile's probably more apt to include it in a premium plan, right? So I think that's going to be the way it's going to be done. I think it's going to be an integration process, right? Getting people to pay for a premium plan that includes it. And then for folks that have legacy plans or an entry level plan that doesn't include it, they could use it on demand, right? They could go into the app, they could put in for access to the feature, and they could pay for it, per use, per gig, per day, or you know what I'm saying? But I think it just needs some ingenuity, right? How do we plan on putting this together? Carriers are good at that. That's what the big carriers do, right? They find ways to structure things to their advantage, and I think that's what they'll do there.
I think that's a good point. You put it in a premium type of plan offering or something like that. I think that makes a lot of sense. You can do a la carte, put it in, for example, like you said, for browser, put it in one of the my plans, one of the perks or something. That may be something that's beneficial as long as it's, got some revenue accretion capabilities. And I don't see anything wrong with it. At the end of the day, telcos have kind of been stuck. They're making what they're making, and we're talking about single digit revenue growth, and that's really not enough to keep up with pace of capex and what it's going to take to continue to manage these networks. There's only so much savings that companies are going to get out of employee reduction, workforce reductions, all that kind of thing. But these networks are getting bigger, not smaller. So you're asking people to essentially do more with less, staffing and things of that nature, and eventually that's going to break. So you got to get to a place where you can figure out a way to create a product that people are willing to purchase. I mean, I'm more partial to Verizon when it comes to that. I think they've done the best job of trying to put together things that they, that I guess that they have access to, in order to be able to create that value proposition. But I mean, time will tell how well it works. But I don't know, Steve. We'll see if people are willing to pay for that particular service and whether it's going to be revenue accretive. I'm still not a fan. I'm still not a fan of weakening terrestrial networks, though. I'm still not, especially for weather events that just aren't happening frequently enough for me to see a world where people are willing to, for example, pay for a premium plan price every single month for a perk that they may not use all the time. I just don't see this thing. I just don't see it.
All right, let's pivot over to this next story. This one's pretty crazy, B. DirecTV to acquire Echostar's video business for $1 frickin' dollar. $1, sir. All right, let that sink in. B, what's your immediate response?
So my first question is DirecTV. Does AT&T still own DirecTV outright, or did they sell
They
AT&T?
they had
Sorry, did they sell
70%, I
DirecTV?
think, ownership, 70%.
Okay, so they are majority owners of DirecTV.
But
Okay,
in the structure of this deal, I think they basically get paid out to go away and they're out.
I don't understand what you just said. Could you elaborate, please?
So the way I think this is structured is, Dish Network's pay TV business is going to all get moved over to DirecTV. So that's customers, that's channel lineups, that's packages, that's uh assets, whatever, including debts, right? You gotta make sure we understand that. Like Dish Network had debts. So all that goes in this transaction. AT&T, for their part in this, is a 70% stake in DirecTV, right? So in order for TPG to become the sole owner of DirecTV with these Dish integrations of their assets, they're going to pay out AT&T. They're going to buy out AT&T's 70% stake. TPG becomes the primary owner of the business. They're the only owner of the business. So TPG becomes DirecTV owner. Dish is no longer involved. So all that's left is that. So now AT&T walks away with $7.3 billion. Remember, they wrote off all this debt already from DirecTV and Warner Media. So this is just icing on the cake for AT&T. And then with respect to Dish, they focus on Echostar operations, which apparently is going to be Boost Mobile in the wireless business, their 5G network build, and now we're hearing about direct to device, or, for lack of a better term, non-terrestrial network stuff, right? So in order to facilitate this, and this is really what Charlie Ergen was trying to accomplish, he's got like an almost $2 billion debt bill that's due in debt maturity in November. So he was scrambling to get this deal done. And I think by making the sale $1, it reduces the tax burden on both of the businesses, right? And for what it's worth, I think it was strategic for him to buy a certain amount of time to finish the network build. Analysts are saying that this buys him 3 years of time. So all of us that have been predicting that, Dish Network would go bankrupt end of this year, beginning of 25, end of 25, we're all wrong, because this just happened. And if this does get consummated and this gets accepted and regulators don't attempt to block it or sue, Dish literally gets 3 more years. They've literally made it so that they've survived all these hard times. They're going to have time to finish that 80% network build. So everybody who's been clamoring for the bankruptcy and the fall of Dish, that's not happening anytime soon. Appreciate you, Tana. Thank you so much, bro. Thanks for all that you do, and all the members that are out there kind of getting involved in the chat, in the live chat. Yeah, this so hopefully that kind of opens up that kind of understanding. I'm not sure if you've been following the story, but basically AT&T's, they're getting $7.5 billion. They're out of the business now. TPG becomes the primary business owner, no other partner, right? And Dish is walking away from their TV, and they're just going to focus on 5G network building and their wireless business.
All right. So I'm gonna say this real quickly, and then I've got to hop off. Unfortunately, thank you for having me on. But I'll say this: the biggest impact to me is that AT&T is not going to get any of that spectrum. It doesn't sound like. So from a pay TV standpoint, I don't really too much care about the pay TV, portion of the deal. That's a dying business anyway. But I will say that the wireless spectrum was the most important asset that Dish had, and if they're going to be allowed to keep that, then this is just AT&T getting some extra cash. More power to them. But from a competitive landscape standpoint, I don't really see where this changes anything as far as that's concerned. The pay TV stuff, I'm not really too concerned. So I'll leave it with that. All right.
All right, solid. Thanks, B.
All right, man. I appreciate your time. Have a good night, everyone.
Take care. Yeah, and that's another detail that I think we can kind of close out the story with is the fact that Dish does not have to submit, sell, spin off, transfer any assets relative to the wireless business. The Dish spectrum is really the only thing that's valuable about that business. Their 8 million or so customers are some of the least profitable customers in the industry. When you look at Dish's ARPU, it's very low. Customers who are on the Boost mobile network, they're looking for the best deals. It's a prepaid offer. So without Dish and EchoStar penetrating the postpaid market where they can sell plans for more money, they don't have the premium customer. They have the bargain customer, right? Everybody on Boost Mobile is looking for a good deal. If you have postpaid customers that want premium plans, they're willing to pay more, sometimes almost double, right? So if I remember correctly, I think the Boost Mobile ARPU is like $37 maybe. And I'm pretty sure like Verizon's postpaid ARPU is like 63, AT&T is like 57. I think T-Mobile's is like 53 or 54, right? So it's like there's a huge gap between postpaid and prepaid relative to ARPU, and that's really why Dish has become so hamstrung. They're not growing, they're not getting more profitable, they're not gaining the customers that are, premium paying customers, right? And then the most important valuable part of the business is Dish's spectrum, but they got to keep it. So the 600 megahertz, that low band, they have some 700. They have a little bit of CBRS, right? The low power N48 piece. They do have DoD spectrum, right? They have the 3.45 gigahertz, that lower part of N77. They have AWS. I think they have a few different types of AWS. Some of it is paired, some of it is download only. It's kind of a hodgepodge because the way they were involved in these auctions 10 years ago. Trying to remember if they have any other spectrum, but so like, and they got a little bit of millimeter wave in some places or whatever, but and that's the 600 megahertz and all that. That's the foundation of their business model. Is we have assets. The most important thing is the spectrum, and they know that 3 years from now, 5 years from now, whenever that they decide to crash out and burn or sell or get another company involved, the assets will always be the spectrum. We're talking about stuff that sells at auction for tens of billions of dollars. In fact, I'm pretty sure Dish spent $10 billion on AWS, the 1700, 2100. And they spent, some money on the CBRS, and they spent, billions at DoD, to get 20 or whatever 40 megahertz of DoD national, but they got to build it. At some point they're going to have to build that stuff, create the capacity, and then I think they can monetize it, through fixed wireless access, which I think they should explore. And we haven't really seen it yet, but it should happen, Yeah, so I wanted to discuss that. I was hoping to get Moose on to kind of discuss some of these things, but we'll be moving on from these topics. And, there's a couple of more things that I got to make some videos on. I did want to cover this last Mobile X piece with you guys. It's probably going to have to wait for a video. I'll probably produce it tonight, and I'll definitely be sure to get back to you guys on what exactly the plans entail, what you guys need to know, and the deals on Mobile X. So stay tuned for more content. I'll answer this last question or statement here from Green. Shout out to Green. Appreciate the super chat, sir. Got great news, Sneed. The tower that only has DoD is getting C-band. Saw the engineers put up the second radio. All right, cool. So those are technicians. Engineers don't climb tower sites, from what I understand. I think they send technicians, right? They install the radio gear. But anyways, I am very happy to hear that. I wonder if it was a supply issue or whatever, but they should be much more efficient than that. They should not be having to climb towers over and over again in the same calendar year in situations like this. But anyways, make sure that when they get that sucker turned on, you speed test it for me, send me some pictures, I'll be sure to include it in a video green because we've been tracking that upgrade for a while now. Anyways, that's it for the show, folks. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Please do like and share this, and we will see you soon on the next stream. Peace.